The ego. So what's wrong with the ego? I want to give you 4 things. And in fact, let me tell you, these 4 things are not original to me. I want you to leave, after you leave today, I want you to go online. I want you to look up a book, a little ebook by Timothy Keller. It's called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And it's a book on this text. And a lot of my thinking on this text is shaped by this book. Very, very insightful of what's wrong with the human ego. 4 things. 1, the ego is empty. It's empty. The ego is empty in that just like if I were to blow this balloon up with hot air, it would look big, it would look sophisticated, it would look proud, look like you have it all together, but really the only thing that's inside is air. You're empty. The human condition is so broken that naturally what we end up doing as human beings is we try to build our identity on anything other than who we are in Christ. We oftentimes, you just think about it, oftentimes we'll build our identity on being a good mom or being a good dad. We'll build our identity based on the fact that we're really, really rich. None of us do that because all of us are poor, right? You feel poor anyway, so maybe that's not you. I'm a really good business owner. I'm a really great friend. I'm a really skilled craftsman. I'm very good at my trade. And we fill ourselves up with this, basing our identity in these other things. But what ends up happening is that eventually those other things, which are less than God, they begin to be shown as less than God, and that they don't really satisfy that God-sized craving that each one of us have been given. Anytime you try to build your identity on anything other than God, you end up finding that it's not sufficient. It would be like putting a few gumballs in one of these balloons and you blow it up and it just rattles around, because the God-sized vacuum that each human heart has can only be filled by God himself. And so the human ego is empty. And what ends up happening is when those idols of the heart, or those things in which we're finding our identity, when those things fail us, so if you base your identity on being a good mom and then your child becomes a drug addict or a drug dealer, or you find your identity in being really rich and then the stock market crashes and then you're, poor, or you find whenever those idols fail you, what ends up happening to your ego is it experiences pain. So not only is the ego empty, the ego is also wounded. It's in pain all the time. In fact, you can't get to the end of the day without your ego being wounded, can you? You think about your body. The parts of your body do not draw attention to themselves unless they're in pain, right? So today when I woke up, I didn't think to myself, wow, my knees feel great. My elbow is bending flawlessly. My body's feeling fantastic. I didn't do that. You only notice the parts of your body when they're in pain, right? So I have a little pain in my feet right now. I've got a little bit of, that's about it. But you know what I'm talking about. You've got pain in your life. The parts of your body only draw attention to themselves when they're hurting. But you think about the ego is always drawing attention to itself because there's something terribly wrong with your ego. You can't get to the end of the day without thinking to yourself, you know what, that person really snubbed me. They're really arrogant. What she said to me, what he said to me, my spouse is just so insensitive sometimes, all the time. He just walked right past me. He just totally ignored me. Your feelings get hurt all the time. We say things like, well, that hurt my feelings. It didn't hurt your feelings. What is a feeling? A feeling where you can't taste it, you can't touch it? They hurt your ego. You have bad feelings about the fact that they hurt your ego, but they hurt your ego. Your ego's always getting hurt. In the ego, you know that it's wounded because it's always drawing attention to itself. So the ego is bruised, it's in pain, it's wounded. So it's puffed up, it's empty, it's bruised, it's in pain, and it's also busy. The busyness of the ego, it's always busy trying to fill itself up with something else. So the way that the ego fills itself up, look there at verse 6 again, is by comparing itself to other people and by boasting in the things that it does. We talked about this last week. These are the 2 things that pride does in our life. Look at the end. So that you may not be puffed up, there's the filled up, in favor of one against the other. So there it is. It's comparison. My camp is better than your camp. My job is better than your job. We're boasting and then we're comparing. That's how the ego deals with its emptiness. It's always busy trying to fill itself up with something else. In fact, that's the nature of pride. C.S. Lewis, one of the brilliant British writer back in the day, he's got a good quote on pride. I've got it up on the screen for you. He said, "Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person. We say that people are proud of being rich or clever or good looking, but they are not. They are proud of being richer or cleverer or better looking than others. If everyone else became equally rich or clever or good looking, then there would be nothing to be proud about." In other words, pride is always about having more than. It's always about being more than. And to do that, in order to feel our ego, we're busy about finding ways that we're better than somebody else. And we all do it. I remember being in Guitar Center. I walked in there was this guy. He was a beginner. He was just learning, basic G, C, D chords. And I was pretty advanced, at least compared to this guy. So I came in, I just started jamming. And I was like, man, I feel really good about myself. And then this other guy comes in, Esteban, I don't know who, somebody like that, and he just takes it to town. And immediately, I didn't feel so good about myself anymore. Immediately, pride shifted from boasting to comparison and insecurity, and that's just the nature of pride. If everybody had the same amount of money, there would be no proud people. The pride is the nature of being more or having more. And not only do we compare, we also boast. So a lot of us are working jobs you probably hate for the mere fact that job provides you enough money so that you can feel better than the person who has less money than you. You work jobs you don't like, you're in relationships you don't enjoy, you do all of these things because it helps you to feel the ego. Because the ego is incredibly broken. It's empty, it's wounded, and it's busy, comparing itself and boasting. And lastly, the ego is fragile. It's inconsistent. It's fragile in the same way that a balloon full of hot air is fragile. If you were to blow that balloon up, anything that's that tight, all it's going to take is just a little prick. In fact, there's really no difference between a balloon that's really inflated and really deflated. The only difference is the amount of air. It's actually the same thing. The same problem is that it's puffed up, and that's the ego. It's fragile. It's always shifting from one extreme to the other. And we all know it. I've got a quote from Madonna that I think illustrates it very well. Anybody know who Madonna is? And I'm not saying Madonna's any worse than any of us. In fact, she shows incredible courage here in this quote from Vogue magazine. But she gets it. She gets what's wrong with the ego. Look at what she says. "My drive in life comes from the fear of being mediocre." Anybody else resonate with that? "That's always pushing me. I push past one spell of it and discover myself a special human being, but then I feel I'm still mediocre and uninteresting unless I do something else." This is why Madonna's always going crazy. "Something else, because even though I've become somebody, I still have to prove I'm somebody. My struggle has never ended, and I guess it never will." Now again, I'm not trying to demean Madonna. She shows incredible self-awareness. What she's saying is my ego is fragile. And you know this, it's always, you got to do the next thing. You got to do something more significant. It's the next $100,000. It's the next level of the business. It's the next promotion. It's the next, it's the next amount of weights in the weight room. It's the next physical modification to your physical appearance. It's always something else. You finally feel significant, but then it's like it's just a moment. It evaporates. Again, you're deflated, and so you've got to busy your ego, filling yourself back up so that you feel significant again. Always looking for the verdict. Always looking, but never being satisfied. It's like the ego is a black hole. It's like the ego is the stomach of your teenager. It just goes on and on and on, and it's never, ever satisfied. That's the brokenness of the human ego. I got a lot of moms hitting their teenagers. Yeah, listen. So how do you fix it? How do you experience healing like Paul says? Well, Paul says, let me show you how I do it. And that's what verses 3 and 4 are about.